Welcome to Tochi Stories. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notification because it will mean the whole world to me. Now let's get right into the story. Brace yourself. The rain fell in angry sheets over Lagos traffic, blurring red brake lights and drowning impatient horns in its roar. Inside a black bulletproof SUV, Chuka Obi checked his Rolex for the third time in 5 minutes. The meeting at Eco Tower was too important to be late for international investors, an unforgiving board, and a deal that could launch his tech firm into global markets. His driver was slow, too slow. Frustrated, Chuka grabbed the wheel. "I'll drive." His security detail exchanged glances but didn't protest. Chuka wasn't in the mood for logic. He hit the gas hard, speeding through intersections, tires slicing through puddles. He barely noticed the crowd of street hawkers along the road, the waving hands, the chaos. His eyes were locked on his destination, not the little girl darting across the road with sachets of water falling from her basket. He slammed the brakes. A dull, sickening thud. Time froze. Pedestrians screamed. The child's body spun like a rag doll and collapsed beside a gutter, her limbs twisted unnaturally, a stream of blood mixing with the rain around her head. For a few seconds, Chuka sat frozen, gripping the steering wheel, his breath caught in his throat. The windshield wipers moved back and forth, slicing the rain like a cruel reminder of time moving on. He stepped out of the car, rain drenching his suit instantly. A crowd had already formed. "Nah, this man hit am. This rich people no day see road again," one voice shouted. His security guard sprang into action, pushing back the crowd, warning against videos, seizing phones. "Move her to the car." "Now," Chuka barked, motioning to his lead guard. The girl wasn't moving. Her tiny chest rose faintly. Her hair clung to her face, soaked and matted in mud and blood. Her tray lay broken beside her, crushed pure water, sachets spilling out like tears. Chuka stared for one moment longer. Something flickered in her face, something eerily familiar, but he shook it off. "Take her to Green Life Hospital. Make sure she lives. And tell PR to handle this." As they drove off, sirens now blaring behind them, Chuka stood in the rain, his hands trembling, unaware that the course of his entire life had just shifted. He didn't know her name, but she would soon become the only name that mattered. By the time Chuka arrived at the meeting, soaked and distracted, the deal had already been postponed. His phone buzzed, updates from his legal team, from PR consultants, from hospital staff. The girl was alive. Barely. Comatose. Internal trauma suspected. No ID. No guardian. No one knew who she was or where she came from. "She's just a beggar," his assistant whispered. "We'll pay off the crowd, take care of hospital bills, control the press." Chuka nodded distantly, his mind already drifting. That look on her face, just before impact. Why did it pull at something buried, so deep? He sipped water, but it didn't go down easily. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar slithering through his chest. It wasn't fear of scandal. It wasn't the loss of public image. It was something more primal, a restlessness, a shadow of grief that hadn't taken shape yet. And it would haunt him until the truth finally came knocking. At Green Life Hospital, the emergency room was in chaos. Nurses barked instructions, surgeons prepped swiftly, and the little girl lay motionless under the white fluorescence, blood crusted on her forehead. No name, no history, just the trauma of broken bones, torn skin, and internal silence. The chief resident on duty, Dr. Itoro, paced nervously. "We need her blood type now. Get the labs running. Stabilize what we can." The team moved fast. Oxygen, fluids, an oxygen mask over her fragile face. But her heart was slowing, her BP dropping. Her body was fighting, but losing. An X-ray revealed fractures. Internal bleeding suspected around the abdomen. Without immediate intervention, the girl wouldn't survive the night. But they couldn't cut yet, not until her vitals were steady. Outside the ward, the media was already swarming. Word had leaked that a child had been hit by him, the billionaire, the perfect face of Nigeria's tech future. It was too public, too messy. Something had to be done, fast. Inside Chuka's penthouse office, far from the sterile smell of antiseptics and beeping monitors, the gears of damage control had begun to turn. His head of communications was typing up statements, carefully crafted to make Chuka appear generous, heartbroken, heroic. His lawyer was drafting NDAs for hospital staff. His fixer was on a call with social media influencers, ready to spin the story. But Chuka sat still, staring at a CCTV clip from the crash. There she was, running across the street, barefoot, soaked, frightened. He replayed the video, paused at the moment their worlds collided. Again, her eyes, that face. Why does she look like someone I've seen before? He whispered. But the team around him didn't hear. Sir, should we proceed with payment to the girl's family once identified? His assistant asked. There's no family, Chuka muttered, his voice hoarse. She has no one. That's the problem. Hours passed. Then a call came. The girl's blood type was extremely rare, AB negative. They had searched the bank, checked relatives of patients. Nothing. No matches. And surgery couldn't happen until blood was secured. Chuka exhaled slowly. Then find one. Do whatever takes. But as he spoke the words, he felt like a stranger to himself. He had made a life out of numbers, strategy, acquisitions, not fragile things like blood types and broken little girls. But for some reason, this child, this nameless girl fighting death in a cold room he paid for, had awakened something dangerous inside him. A whisper from the past, a face he buried, and a truth that would not stay quiet. 3 days. That's how long they searched. Hospitals, clinics, international donor registries. Every attempt ended in dead ends. The surgeons grew desperate. The child's condition worsened. Her abdomen began to swell. Fever. Labored breathing. We're losing her, Dr. Ettore said grimly. They postponed surgery again. With each delay, the girl's chances slipped further away. Nurses whispered about miracles. Maybe she's not meant to live, one muttered. But then a young nurse, watching Chuka pace the hallway like a man possessed, dared to suggest, why not test him? Everyone froze. Test who? The man who brought her here. The one paying for everything. At first, the doctor scoffed. What were the odds? But desperation made them brave. They asked Chuka to submit to a test, just to rule him out. He agreed, half irritated, half curious. When the result came, the room went silent. Chuka's blood matched hers. Perfectly. Not just compatible. Identical markers, rare recessives. Dr. Ettore's hands trembled. She'll live if we transfuse now. But it has to be him. No one else. Chuka stared at the results like a man looking into a mirror and seeing someone else entirely. The world around him dulled. Voices blurred. For reasons he couldn't explain, he felt broken. Do it, he said. They took his blood, hooked it into her body, and slowly, like a dawn crawling through thick fog, her vitals began to rise. Heart rate normalized. Fever reduced. The swelling eased. The little girl, nameless and alone, was surviving because of the man who nearly killed her. And yet, as Chuka sat outside her room later that night, listening to the steady beep of machines through the door, something gnawed at him. Why did his blood match so perfectly? Why did her face look like a dream he once had? Why did his chest tighten every time he looked at her? He tried to push it down, told himself it was guilt, nothing more. But guilt didn't explain the ache in his gut. Guilt didn't explain why her presence tore open memories he thought long buried. He leaned back in the hospital chair, hand over his eyes, and whispered to the ceiling, "Who are you, little girl? And why does it feel like I've met you before?" Sleep refused to visit Chuka that night. He lay wide-eyed in his penthouse, surrounded by glass walls that showed the twinkling skyline of Lagos, a city he once ruled with precision. But for the first time in years, he felt powerless, restless. His sheets felt like concrete, his mattress like nails. He tossed, sat up, poured whiskey. It didn't go down right. His mind was back in that hospital hallway, watching blood flow from his arm into a stranger, a child with broken bones and no name. Only, it didn't feel like she was a stranger. She felt tethered to him, There was something unsettling about how his chest ached when he saw her bruised face. Something ancient. Something that clawed at guilt older than this incident. Something that told him this wasn't the first time he'd failed her, or someone like her. He began to dream, or maybe it was a memory warped by time. A warm kitchen. The smell of jollof rice cooking. A soft laugh echoing from a girl in a faded wrapper, washing plates. Her eyes, bright with curiosity, would flick up when she saw him standing in the doorway, stealing glances. Her name was Annuli. He hadn't thought about her in over a decade. Not since that night he came home to find her gone. His mother had said she was a thief, that she had been caught stealing jewelry and had fled. It was a shame, really. He had liked her. More than liked her. He had sat beside her on the back steps of the mansion when no one was looking, shared his food with her, asked her questions about her village, her dreams. She used to laugh shyly and say, "I don't dream, Olga. I just want to eat 3 times a day." He used to laugh too. Those days had felt honest. Pure. Then she vanished. Now, that same ache he felt as a younger man, the confusion, the hollowness was back. Only this time it had a heartbeat, and that heartbeat was faintly thudding inside a hospital ward he owned but couldn't control. That girl wasn't just any victim. She had awakened something dark and forgotten in him, something he didn't even know was still alive inside. He remembered staring at her face again through the glass window of the ICU, the shape of her jaw, her lips. Even in swelling and bruises, there was a softness he could not explain. And the guilt was no longer about the accident. It was deeper, like life had circled back to hold him accountable for a sin he never fully understood. And until he found out who she was and why his soul felt bound to her, peace would not return. The sun had risen, but for Annuli, the world was still covered in darkness. Her eyes were bloodshot from nights of crying. Her lips were cracked from whispering prayers into the wind. She had searched every street corner, every drainage trench, every corner of the market. "Have you seen my daughter, Zora?" Small girl, dark skin, very slim, carrying pure water in a black basin. They shook their heads. Some didn't even answer. A few pitied her. Most just walked away. Her feet were swollen from walking barefoot. The slippers she had wore out 3 days ago. Her palms were scraped from falling when she tried to chase a moving bus someone said her daughter had entered. That turned out to be a dead end. She went home every night to an empty room, no food, no warmth, just a small sleeping mat and the worn wrapper her daughter last folded beside her. She clutched it to her chest like a lifeline. Annuli blamed herself. She had told Zora never to go to that highway. People drive like demons there, she had warned. Rich people no day see poor man. But hunger has a way of silencing warnings. That day, Zora begged her mother to let her go to the traffic stop. She said there were more cars there, more buyers. Annuli had said no, firmly. But when she returned from sweeping a compound for 700 Nigerian nairas, her daughter was gone. The tray was missing. Her stomach dropped. She had a feeling, a mother's feeling. Something wasn't right. Days passed. Rumors began swirling. A small girl was hit on a Denise Jones road. Some big man carried her to private hospital. But there were so many accidents in Lagos. So many little girls who never came home. How would she know it was her daughter? But something inside Annuli wouldn't let her give up. She wandered the roads, slept outside pharmacies, hoping a nurse or cleaner might have seen something. "She's 11, she said over and over. "Her name is Zora. Her eye is small like mine. She likes to sing when no one is listening. Please help me find her." But in a city of millions, her voice was a whisper drowned by wealth, chaos, and apathy. Until one tired security guard, watching her beg near a BRT terminal, pulled her aside and said, "There's a girl in Green Life Hospital, hit by a convoy 3 days ago. No family. They say she was selling pure water." That was all Annuli needed. She ran barefoot. No bag. No water. No money. Just hope, a desperate, burning hope that her child was still breathing. Years ago, in a world far simpler, the mansion on Banana Island was quiet during the afternoons. That's when Chuka, just 21 and arrogant, would sneak into the back corridor of the servants' quarters. That was where Annuli washed dishes, her hands always submerged in sudsy water, her hair tied back with a faded scarf. She would glance up when he arrived, always startled at first, then softened. "Olga, you again," she'd whisper with a smile. But he hated when she called him that. "I told you to stop calling me that," he'd say. "My name's Chuka. Just Chuka." She would giggle. "But your mummy go shout if she see me talking to you like that." And she was right. His mother, the proud polished society queen, had no patience for Annuli's presence. She didn't like that her son lingered near the help. Didn't like the way Annuli's eyes looked at him. "A maid will never carry the Obi name," she had warned him one evening. "You're not a child. Behave like the heir you were born to be." But Chuka didn't care back then. Annuli was the only person in that house who didn't treat him like a god. She laughed at his silly stories. She didn't know stocks or hedge funds, but she listened when he talked about dreams. They would eat puff-puff together in the yard when no one was looking. She had a tiny scar on her chin, and when he asked her how she got it, she said, "From running after my little brother. He died during malaria season. I miss him." That night, Chuka had held her hand. They were just two broken young people trying to feel whole in a house too big for truth. Eventually, the sneaking turned to touching, then kissing, then nights when he'd lie in her lap, hiding from the world. She was his peace, his secret, his rebellion. And then, suddenly, she was gone. He returned from a business trip and was told by his mother that Annuli had been caught stealing from the jewelry cabinet. She ran when she was confronted, his mother had said, sipping her wine. "We spared the police. You're welcome." Chuka had been stunned, betrayed. He didn't believe it at first, but his mother had insisted, even showed him the empty jewelry box. So he forced himself to move on, deleted her number, never asked questions. His mother had always known what was best, or so he thought. Now, as he sat in his car outside the hospital, a memory of her laughter returned, and it felt like someone had just carved open a wound he never treated. The truth was beginning to rise, like steam from a boiling past. He had forgotten her, but the universe hadn't. And the child sleeping in that hospital bed was the consequence of a lie he had believed far too easily. The night Annuli was thrown out of the Obi mansion still replayed in her nightmares. It wasn't just the suddenness, it was the silence that followed. She remembered standing in the servants' corridor, holding her small gotta-must-go bag packed hastily with clothes she didn't even fold. Her body shook as she tried to explain. "I swear I didn't take anything, madam. Please, I didn't touch your things." But Madam Obi stood stiff, arms folded across her chest, flanked by two security men. "Lies. You stole my necklace. One of my emerald sets. You think because my son likes talking to you, that you now have access to the family's vault." Annuli was stunned. She had never even been in that part of the house. "I've never even seen it. Ask the other maids." "Please," her words broke into whimpers. But the older woman wasn't listening. She waved her hand and said, "Get her out. I don't want filth in this house again." Annuli screamed, not because of the shame, but because Chuka wasn't there. The boy who used to hold her hands and whisper dreams into her ears. Where was he? Why didn't he come out? They dragged her to the gate, and her knees scraped the concrete as she fell. Rain had begun to drizzle, and thunder cracked in the distance. A slap from one of the guards made her vision blur. She was thrown out like a rag. She sat there in the rain, trembling, heartbroken, betrayed by silence. That night, she slept under the bridge near the estate, not knowing what to do next. Her pride wouldn't let her return to her village, and her shame wouldn't let her speak of what had happened. Days later, she found out she was pregnant. She had no money, no job, no friends. She worked as a cleaner in a small bukka, hiding her growing belly under overalls until it became too obvious to ignore. She gave birth in a government hospital that smelled of blood, bleach, and neglect. No one came to visit. No one knew. But the child that came out crying, Zora, became the only light in her life. A light she swore never to lose. For years, Annuli worked herself to the bone to keep them alive. She cleaned gutters, washed clothes for women who mocked her, begged for food when Zora was sick. She held her daughter at night and told her fairy tales she made up, ones where maids married kings and children were never abandoned. She made sacrifices no one saw, gave up everything to be a mother. But deep down, she still carried the scar. Chuka never searched for her, never called, never asked. She believed the lie, that he was just like his mother, cruel beneath the charm. She had told herself he would have believed anything his mother said because, after all, she was just a maid. So when she now stood in the hospital corridor, seeing him again, all the rage, all the pain, came rushing back like a dam bursting. It wasn't just about the accident anymore. He had broken her once, and now he had nearly destroyed the only piece of her still standing. Back in his car, parked just outside the hospital gate, Chuka sat in suffocating silence. His fingers gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned pale, but it wasn't anger. It was confusion. Guilt. Guilt so heavy it sat on his chest like wet cement. The woman he had just seen, wild-eyed, weeping on the hospital floor, fists clenched, voice hoarse with rage, was Annuli, the maid, the girl he had once kissed beneath the mango tree in his family's garden, the girl who had whispered dreams of opening her own tailoring shop someday. That same girl now looked at him like he was death itself. And her daughter, that fragile little girl in the ICU, was his daughter. His blood had matched because he was her father. The realization came slowly at first, then hit him like the crash all over again. He had a daughter, for 11 years, and he never knew. Not because he forgot, not because he didn't care, but because someone had ripped that truth from him and fed him a lie he swallowed. His mind spiraled. He remembered everything now. How he came back from a business trip, and his mother told him Annuli had stolen from her. How she made it seem so matter-of-fact. "You dodged a bullet," she had said. "Girls like that trap rich boys with pregnancy and disgrace. You'll thank me later." And he had, foolishly, believed it. He didn't check. He didn't ask. He didn't search. He buried his feelings, let time erase her face from his mind, and poured himself into work, wealth, and image. But now it made sense. Why the girl's eyes haunted him. Why his blood felt drawn to her even before the test confirmed it. It was as if his soul had known before his mind ever could. But knowing the truth didn't undo the past. It didn't erase the fact that while he sipped champagne in skyscrapers, his daughter had been hawking pure water in traffic to feed her mother. He had given her life, and then abandoned her. Not with his actions, maybe, but with his silence, his negligence. And now he was here, watching her lie between life and death, not even knowing his name. Inside the hospital, Zora's monitors beeped in a steady rhythm. She was stable, for now, thanks to the transfusion. But her body still hadn't awakened. Her brain was still lost in unconsciousness, somewhere between pain and healing. Chuka walked back inside and looked at her through the glass. Tubes ran in and out of her fragile arms. Her lips were chapped, her cheekbones sharp with malnourishment. He felt an ache in his chest he had never felt before. Not when his father died. Not even when his first company collapsed. This ache was personal, unforgiving, the kind that reconfigures the human heart. He put his hand against the glass and whispered her name, Zora, for the first time. It tasted unfamiliar, yet right. He wasn't sure what came next. But one thing was clear. He would not fail her again. Annuli didn't remember how she got to the hospital. Her legs moved on their own. Her chest heaved like it would collapse. Her feet were blistered. But she couldn't feel anything except the dread. When the security man mentioned Green Life Hospital, she knew, deep in her bones. Something told her it was her daughter. She prayed with every step, bargained with heaven. Let her not be the one. Let it be someone else's child. Not mine, not Zora. But when she arrived, panting and drenched in sweat, and saw the nurse's face, the pity in her eyes, her legs buckled. She dropped to her knees and screamed, "Where is she? Where is my baby?" The nurse led her to the ICU corridor, gently, as if holding a woman made of ash. Through the glass, Annuli saw the child, her child, covered in bandages, pale, lifeless, wires sticking out of her body like they were trying to glue her soul together. And Annuli broke. She threw herself to the floor, banging her fists against the tiles. No, God, no, not my only child, not my Zora. Her cries pierced the silence of the ward. Nurses tried to lift her, but she pushed them away. She lay flat on the cold floor, face against it, as if trying to merge with the pain. She's all I have. She's all I have in this world, she wept. Why would someone do this? What kind of wicked soul hits a child and runs? And just then she heard the footsteps. Heavy, familiar. Her body knew before her eyes did. She looked up slowly, and there he was. Chuka. Clean suit. Designer shoes. Haunted eyes. Annuli's breath caught in her throat. Her pain turned to rage in one heartbeat. She stood up and lunged at him. You did this. After everything, after leaving us, you still came back to destroy what's left of me. Her voice cracked, feral with grief. Security rushed to hold her back, but she fought like a wild animal. You left me to suffer with a child you never asked about. You promised you'd never leave me. Now you come back to take her too. Why do you hate me so much? What did I ever do to deserve this pain? Chuka stood frozen. His lips moved, but no sound came. He couldn't speak, couldn't explain. Her words hit him harder than any blow ever could. In that moment, he didn't feel rich, didn't feel powerful. He felt like a criminal, like a man staring into the eyes of the woman he destroyed, and the child who almost paid the price for a lie he never questioned. And now, the only thing left to do was begin the long, brutal journey to redemption. Chuka didn't know what hurt more, the shrill scream Annuli let out when she saw him, or the way her body trembled as she threw herself at him like a mother possessed. He didn't fight back. He didn't raise a hand. He simply stood there and let her rage fall upon him like judgment from the heavens. You, she cried again, the word heavy with disbelief and anguish. You're the one who hit her? You're the one behind this. Her voice cracked and her legs buckled again, but her fury held her upright. Chuka wanted to speak, to explain, to apologize, but his throat closed up. There were no words big enough to hold the weight of what he'd done, no sentence that could make sense of this full-circle tragedy. Nurses and security guards quickly intervened, holding her back before she could land a blow. But her voice, her words, they hit harder than fists ever could. You left me to suffer with a child after promising you'd never abandon me. Now you nearly killed that same child. What kind of monster are you, Chuka? The entire hallway fell silent. Her words echoed against the hospital walls, folding in on themselves with the sharpness of betrayal. Other patients and relatives peeked from waiting areas. Some watched with confusion, others with recognition. The headlines had already started to spread. Billionaire involved in hit-and-run cover-up. But the cameras hadn't captured the most painful truth. This wasn't just a stranger's child. It was his child. And the woman crying on the hospital floor wasn't a stranger. She was the only one who had ever looked at him without needing anything in return. Annuli turned her back to him now, shielding herself as she crouched beside the ICU window again. Her hands touched the glass gently, as if trying to transfer her warmth into the cold body of her daughter. My Zora, my baby, she wept. You're all I have. You're my only family in this world. If anything happens to you, I won't survive it. Chuka took a step forward. Annuli, I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know she was mine. I didn't know you were pregnant. My mother said you stole. She said you ran away. His voice trailed off as he saw her head turn slowly, her tear-streaked face narrowing into disbelief. Your mother, she repeated with scorn. Your mother said? So you just believed her? After everything we shared? After all the times you said you loved me, you chose her word over mine. Her chest rose and fell heavily. Do you know what it's like to carry a child in shame? To raise her while hiding from the world? To tell her stories about a father who might have been kind, just to ease the hunger in her stomach? She shook her head and stood. You took everything from me, Chuka. My job, my dignity, my voice. And now you want to take her too? He didn't answer. He couldn't. Because everything she said was true. Later that night, Chuka sat across from his mother in the elegant marble living room of their family estate. The chandeliers sparkled like ice above them, but the atmosphere was thick with heat, the heat of truth finally rising. Madame Obi sat calmly, sipping chamomile tea from a porcelain cup, her posture as stiff as ever. Chuka, on the other hand, was shaking with restrained fury. You lied to me, he said, voice low but burning. You said Annuli stole from you. You said she ran away. You never mentioned she was pregnant. His mother sighed, setting the cup down. Because she was Chuka. She was going to trap you with that child. That girl was nothing but a burden, and I did what any mother would. I protected you. Chuka stood abruptly. Protected me? You destroyed me. You tore apart something that mattered to me. You let me walk away from my own child. Madame Obi didn't flinch. You were young. You were emotional. You were ready to throw your inheritance away for a maid with village dreams. I gave you the life you have now. Would you rather be living in the slums with a baby and a disgraced name? Chuka paced the floor, his fists clenched at his sides. You think success justifies cruelty? That money makes up for lies? That little girl in the hospital is my daughter. She was hit by my car. She almost died, and I didn't even know her name. Do you know what that does to a man? To realize the blood in her veins came from me, and I never even knew she existed. His voice broke. I failed her because you made sure I would. But Madame Obi simply looked away, her expression unreadable. It's too late to change the past, Chuka. All you can do now is move on and keep your image clean. That girl doesn't need to ruin everything you've built. That was the final straw. Chuka walked over to her, looked her in the eyes, and said, She's not ruining anything. You did that already. Then he turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. The echoes lingered in the quiet of the house like thunder. He drove back to the hospital, every turn of the road reminding him of the day his car collided with his child, and changed the course of every life tied to hers. He had believed a lie, and now it was time to start living with the truth, no matter how much it hurt. For the next several days, Chuka kept returning to the hospital, even when he wasn't allowed inside the ICU. He would sit in the hallway outside, a bouquet of fresh lilies on the chair beside him, though he didn't know if Zora liked flowers. He hadn't earned the right to know things like that. Annuli avoided him like a ghost, and every time she passed by, their eyes would meet briefly, then break apart like brittle glass. She hadn't spoken a word to him since that day. She barely acknowledged his existence. But he remained, watching, waiting, regretting. Each day, Zora's vitals improved. Her body was fighting. Her spirit was strong. And though she hadn't opened her eyes yet, Chuka began speaking to her softly through the glass. I'm sorry, he would say. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me. But I'm here now. I promise you. I'm not going anywhere. Annuli sat at her daughter's bedside with her hands constantly rubbing Zora's fingers, her lips murmuring prayers into the air. Don't leave me, my baby. You're all I have. Wake up and come back to me. Sometimes she would look up and see Chuka just a few feet away, eyes sunken, beard rough, suit crumpled like he hadn't gone home in days. And she'd remember the young boy who used to sneak her pieces of cake from the kitchen, who once cried in her arms after his father hit him, who used to say, I feel safe around you, Annuli. But that boy was gone. What stood now was a stranger in an expensive suit with a guilty conscience. And yet, something in his eyes still flickered. Maybe the boy hadn't died completely. Maybe he had just been buried, beneath pride, privilege, and the lies of a mother who didn't believe poor girls deserved love. One morning, as she was adjusting Zora's blanket, she heard his voice behind her. I'll take care of everything. Her surgery, her school, her life. Just let me be there. She turned slowly, her face unreadable. You think money is what she needs? You think she needs toys and gadgets? Do you know how many nights I stayed awake because she had a fever and no medicine? Do you know what it's like to send a child to school with torn shoes and still watch her smile and say, "Thank you, Mummy"? Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. "I don't want your help, Chuka. Not your money. Not your guilt. You weren't there when we needed you. We've learned how to survive without you." She turned back to her daughter. "If she wakes up and never knows your name, maybe that's for the best." And that silence returned, the one that stretched between them like a graveyard of all they could have been. Every night, Chuka sat outside Zora's ICU room as if on trial. He would lean forward in the hard plastic chair, elbows resting on his knees, eyes locked through the thick glass wall that separated him from his daughter. In the pale green glow of the machines surrounding her, she looked so small. Her chest rose and fell with mechanical precision. Her head, wrapped in soft gauze, turned slightly to the left. Her lips parted just enough to remind him that she was still alive, not quite awake, not quite gone. Some nights, he would bring storybooks. He didn't read them out loud, not yet. But he flipped through the pages silently, tracing each line as if the words might one day reach her. He watched her fingers, praying for them to move. Just once. Something. Anything. And sometimes, in the deepest part of the night, when the nurses dozed off and the world seemed still, he whispered her name. "Zora," he would say gently, like a man trying not to break something already broken. It wasn't just guilt that tethered him to her bedside. It was something deeper, something primal. He began to notice things about her, things that twisted his heart in unexpected ways. Her tiny nose was identical to his when he was her age. Her lips curled in sleep the same way his did when he had nightmares. Once her hand twitched, and he saw a familiar mole just below her wrist. It was the same one his late grandfather had. That was when he broke down in the hallway and sobbed into his hands. A nurse gently placed a hand on his back and said nothing. There were no words for the agony of a father realizing too late that he had missed everything. Her first cry, her first steps, her first words, her birthdays, her scraped knees, her dreams. All gone. 11 years of fatherhood erased by silence, cowardice, and the calculated cruelty of his mother. And now this little girl, his daughter, lay between life and death because he had been too busy chasing empires. But beyond the sorrow was the growing ache to do something, anything, to show he was more than the mistake that put her in that bed. He started organizing specialists from abroad, offered to sponsor the hospital's children's wing in her name, secretly paid off annualized debts, and sent anonymous food parcels to her apartment. But none of it mattered to the one person who needed to see his heart, Annuli. She still treated him with silence sharp enough to cut flesh. She barely looked at him when they crossed paths. Once, he offered to bring Zora's favorite cartoon on a tablet. Annuli had replied without turning, "She doesn't need screens. She needs prayers." Chuka said nothing. He simply placed the tablet gently on the windowsill and walked away. Redemption, he realized, was not a business deal. He couldn't throw money at this. He couldn't schedule forgiveness. He had to wait and hope that love, if it still existed in any form, might open a door he could walk through, step by broken step. Charity returned from Dubai on a Tuesday afternoon, heels clacking against marble as she strutted into Chuka's penthouse. She wore a gold designer blouse that shimmered like sunlight and perfume that smelled like power. But the man who greeted her was not the Chuka she had left. His eyes were heavier, his voice softer, his embrace brief and distracted. "You look tired," she said, sitting on the couch and crossing her legs. "Is everything okay?" Chuka poured himself a glass of water and sighed. He wanted to lie, to say it was work stress or a temporary slump, but he couldn't. Not anymore. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. And when he told her everything, the accident, the hospital, the blood match, the daughter, she laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. "So let me get this straight," she said slowly, voice turning cold. "You hit a beggar girl, found out she's your daughter from a maid you once rolled around with, and now you're playing Charity King? Is that what this is?" Chuka winced. "It's not like that, Charity. I didn't know. Of course you didn't know," she snapped. "Because if you had known, we wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be this sentimental fool, throwing your life away for a mistake. Her words stung. Her eyes narrowed. You're not thinking clearly. We're on the brink of sealing the SiliconNet merger, and you're mooning over a child who barely knows your name and a woman who probably wants your money. Chuka turned toward her sharply. Don't talk about them like that. Charity stood up, furious. Oh, so now I can't even speak the truth? You think she wants your love? Chuka, wake up. That woman is using your guilt against you. She's manipulating you. But Chuka had heard enough. Leave, he said quietly. What? Leave. I need space. Charity stared at him, stunned. You're choosing them over me? He didn't answer. The silence said everything. With a scoff, she grabbed her handbag and stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to make the walls tremble. But Charity wasn't the kind of woman to walk away quietly. 2 days later, tabloids exploded with headlines. Billionaire caught in secret love child scandal. Is this the end of the Obi dynasty? Chuka's phone rang nonstop. Investors pulled out. His board demanded a response. Reporters camped at the hospital. And in the middle of the chaos, Annuli's apartment was vandalized by strangers who had seen her picture on gossip blogs. Charity had gone nuclear. Her jealousy transformed into vengeance, and Chuka knew this wasn't just about a breakup. This was war. And his daughter, the child he had just begun to connect with through whispered bedside visits, was now caught in the crossfire. It was no longer just about guilt or redemption. It was about protection. And for the first time in his life, Chuka realized he would give up everything, his name, his fortune, his empire, to shield Zora from a world that had already tried to break her before she could fully open her eyes. Zora opened her eyes on a rainy Friday morning, just as the power flickered once in the ICU and the generator hummed back to life. The nurse on duty gasped, Doctor, she's awake." Annuli, who had fallen asleep on the chair with her daughter's hand in hers, jolted up, eyes wide. "Zora? Z." The child blinked slowly, eyes foggy with sleep and medication. Her lips moved. "Mummy." Her voice was dry, barely above a whisper, but it was real. "Alive." Annuli cried instantly, big, choking sobs of relief. She kissed her daughter's hands, her cheeks, her forehead. "Thank you, God. Thank you, Jesus. She's back." Nurses rushed in. Monitors beeped. A doctor checked her vitals, shining a light into her eyes. But Annuli only saw one thing. Her baby was alive. Her light, her reason for breathing, had returned from the valley of death. Chuka was in the corridor when it happened. He saw the lights flashing inside the room and rushed over, breath caught in his throat. He stood at the glass, afraid to enter, afraid to disturb a moment that didn't belong to him. And then, for the first time, Zora turned her head slightly and looked at him. Their eyes met, and time stopped. Hers were still groggy, confused, but something in her face shifted. She recognized him. Not as her father, she didn't know that yet, but as the man who was always there. Her brow furrowed. "Uncle," she croaked. It was all she could manage. Annuli stiffened slightly, then nodded. "Yes, baby. He's been here. Every day." Chuka's heart cracked open. That single word, uncle, meant more than any title he had ever carried in his life. He opened the door slowly and walked in, not too close. "Hi, Zora," he said softly. "I'm really glad you're awake." But the joy was short-lived. That evening, a hospital staff member informed Annuli that the press had leaked Zora's name and photo. The blogs were ruthless. Some said she was faking the accident. Others called Annuli a gold digger. Threatening messages flooded her phone. She collapsed on the hospital floor in frustration and screamed, "What else do you people want from me? Haven't I suffered enough?" Chuka found her there and knelt beside her. For the first time, she didn't push him away. She just sobbed against his shoulder, broken and exhausted. "I just want my daughter to live," she said. "I just want peace." Chuka held her tighter. "And I'll fight to give you both that peace," he replied. And for the first time since everything began, since the crash, since the screams, since the blood, Annuli allowed herself to hope. The headlines didn't stop. Day after day, new angles emerged, each one more cruel, more invasive than the last. Tech billionaire's secret child, maid's revenge or true love? From house help to homewrecker, the rise of Annuli Okoye. The internet had become a vicious playground, and Charity's carefully planted lies were bearing poisonous fruit. Chuka's company began to bleed publicly. Stock values dipped. His board summoned him for an emergency meeting, and the once confident, sharp-witted CEO sat at the head of a table full of men who looked at him now as a liability. "You need to contain this," one of the directors said coldly. "Reinstate your public engagement with Charity. Issue a public statement refuting paternity." Another added, "The narrative is spiraling. You're looking soft, emotional, weak." Chuka didn't respond immediately. He looked down at his hands, then said slowly, "The child in that hospital is mine. I won't disown her to save face." Gasps circled the table. "Then you'll lose everything," the chairman warned. "Then so be it," Chuka replied. And he stood and walked out, leaving behind a world built on image and illusion. But outside the glass towers and executive halls, the storm raged harder for Annuli. Her home was no longer safe. Strangers had thrown stones at her window, spat insults when she stepped out to buy food. Rumors spread like wildfire, some calling her a liar, others calling her a blackmailer. Some even accused her of using her daughter to trap a man for wealth. But Annuli kept her head down and stayed at Zora's side, refusing to be broken. The pain, however, cut deep. She had lived in shame before, yes, but this was different. Before, no one knew her name. Now, the whole country did. And they had opinions. People judged what they didn't understand. They didn't see the years she sold her wrappers to buy her daughter textbooks. They didn't see the nights she cried when Zora had fever and no money for Panadol. They didn't hear the lullabies she hummed when they slept hungry. All they saw now was a woman who once worked as a maid, now tied to a billionaire. And that was enough to make her a villain. Meanwhile, Chuka stayed close, watching his daughter recover inch by inch. She was speaking now, even laughing sometimes when a nurse told her funny stories or when the janitor slipped on a mop bucket. But she still didn't fully understand what was happening around her. The cameras, the reporters, the strange way her mother's face twisted every time Chuka entered the room. And Chuka, for all his wealth and power, couldn't erase the damage he'd done. One day, while Zora was coloring on her hospital tray, she looked up and asked innocently, "Uncle Chuka, why do people hate Mummy so much?" Chuka felt something twist inside him. He knelt beside her and said, "Because some people are afraid of women who are strong." Zora tilted her head. "Is Mummy strong?" "The strongest," he whispered. And in that moment, as she gave him a shy smile, Chuka realized no scandal could make him walk away again. Not now. Not ever. The weight of fatherhood hit Chuka fully one rainy evening, when he saw Zora curled up in bed after a physical therapy session, holding a teddy bear he had brought earlier. She had named a tiger, despite its soft face and tiny bow tie. Her eyes were half closed, exhausted from the effort of learning to walk again. Annuli sat nearby, holding a flask of hot soup she had made, agbono with smoked fish, Zora's favorite. Chuka stood at the door, hesitant. He had knocked softly. Annuli had nodded, but didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence had become his mirror, always reflecting what he was too ashamed to admit. That he had failed. That he had abandoned her without lifting a finger. That he had once held her heart in his hand and crushed it by doing nothing. But tonight, he couldn't stay on the outside looking in. Tonight, he had to ask for something he no longer believed he deserved. After Zora drifted into sleep, her lips moving softly as if singing to herself in dreams, Chuka approached. Annuli sat motionless. He sat on the opposite side of the room. "I've never said this properly," he began, voice trembling slightly. "But I'm sorry, Annuli, for everything." She didn't respond. He continued. "I was stupid. I was weak. I believed my mother because it was easier, because it let me keep the life I was told to protect." He paused, searching her face. Still unreadable. "But the truth? I thought about you. So many nights. I wondered what happened. I told myself if you had really cared, you would have reached out. I never imagined you were carrying my child." His voice cracked, but he pressed on. "Let me fix this. Not with money. With presence. With love. I want to be her father, Annuli. Even if you never forgive me, let me be in her life." For the first time in days, Annuli looked directly at him. Her eyes were swollen from too many sleepless nights, but they were still fierce. "You want to be her father now," she said quietly. "Now that the world is watching? Now that you feel guilt in your bones? Where were you when she coughed all night in the harmattan and I had to wrap her with my only wrapper? Where were you when she asked me if she had a daddy like the other kids, and I had to lie so her heart wouldn't break?" Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. "You think this is about forgiveness? It's not. It's about trust. You left once, and she almost died. I will never let her get hurt again, Chuka. Never." The room went still. He nodded slowly. "Then let me earn it. One visit at a time. One day at a time. I'll be here every single day, even if she only calls me uncle forever." And for the first time, Annuli didn't turn away. The next few days passed with subtle shifts. Chuka no longer hovered outside Zora's room like a ghost. Annuli allowed him inside, even if she said little. Zora began to look forward to his visits. He brought crayons, soft hairbands, books filled with galaxies and planets, things she had never imagined owning. She sat up in bed more often now, drawing pictures of stars and stick figures. One afternoon, while coloring a big yellow sun, she looked up and said, "Uncle Chuka, do you have a daddy?" Chuka smiled faintly. "I used to. He's in heaven now." She nodded solemnly. "Mine's not in heaven. I don't have one." Her words cut through him like glass. He smiled sadly and said, "You do, Zora. He's just learning how to be a better one." She looked confused, but didn't ask further. She handed him the drawing and said, "You can keep this." That was the first gift she had ever given him. He folded it with trembling fingers and tucked it inside his wallet. Meanwhile, Annuli remained watchful, guarded. She no longer fought his presence, but she didn't trust it yet either. She had seen too many promises melt in the sun, but she couldn't deny what she was seeing. Zora laughed more now. She smiled in her sleep. Her appetite had returned. She spoke more freely, about school, about dreams. And every time she talked about the stars, Annuli saw her glance at Chuka as if he had placed them there himself. It frightened her, because love, especially from a child, was easily given and easily broken. One evening, as they left the hospital together, she stopped him by the entrance. "I'm giving you a chance, Chuka. But if you ever disappear on her again, I swear on everything I have left in this world, I'll never let you near her again." He nodded. "I believe you, and I'll never let that happen." And so they settled into a fragile routine. Chuka came by every morning before work, sometimes bringing breakfast. He returned in the evenings, reading bedtime stories. He never missed a day. Sometimes he and Annuli talked about nothing really. The weather, the hospital food, sometimes about Zora's drawings. But slowly, something softened between them. The walls remained, but cracks appeared. One day, Annuli found Chuka asleep in a chair beside Zora's bed, his head slumped forward, his hand still gripping her tiny fingers. She watched for a long time, then walked away, not in anger, but with a strange ache in her chest. Because despite everything, she saw the man who had once made her laugh in the servants' corridor, and the father her daughter might one day come to love. Charity returned, not with tears or apologies, but with weapons made of bitterness and pride. She walked into Chuka's office, flanked by her lawyer and a gossip blog reporter posing as her assistant. Her eyes sparkled with revenge, her words rehearsed and sharp. "This is your last chance," she said coldly. "Either you publicly denounce the child and the maid, or I go to every media house in Lagos with a signed statement saying you paid her off to fake the paternity results." Chuka looked up from his desk, calm but unreadable. "You lied to the entire country just to protect your ego?" he asked quietly. Charity didn't blink. "You humiliated me. You destroyed our brand. And now, you want to be a hero to a girl you didn't even know existed until your car broke her ribs?" That's not love, Chuka. That's guilt dressed up as fatherhood. Her voice trembled with rage. And you chose them over me. But Chuka had changed. The man who once cared about appearances, who once feared scandal more than sin, was gone. He stood up slowly, buttoning his jacket. Charity, he said, I don't owe you a damn thing. His voice was calm. You loved me for what I represented, a name, a lifestyle. But you never once asked me how I slept at night. You never once noticed when I couldn't breathe from everything I was carrying. He paused. Zora's laughter gives me peace. Annuli's strength humbles me. And for the first time in my life, I feel like a man. Not a brand. Not a profile. A man. He walked past her. Do what you must. But know this, I won't let you or anyone else come between me and my daughter again. Charity's face twisted with hatred. She's turning you into nothing, she spat. No, he replied. She's turning me into something I can live with. He left her there, stunned, defeated, and walked out into the rain with clarity soaking into his bones. But the storm wasn't done. That same night, a fake article appeared online, made claims paternity for fame, DNA was rigged. The hospital was ambushed with journalists. Zora's name trended. Annuli's home was surrounded. She held her daughter close and wept into her shoulder. I'm so tired, baby, she whispered. I just want us to be safe. Chuka arrived, soaked, furious, but determined. He stood before the cameras for the first time and said, I am Chuka Obi. That little girl is my daughter. I failed her once. I won't do it again. To hell with my image. To hell with public perception. This is my family. It was raw, unpolished, but it went viral. Not for the scandal, but for the truth. The next day, dozens of single mothers shared their stories. People began to see Annuli differently. Not as a gold digger, but as a fighter. A survivor. And for the first time, the world began to believe what she always knew. Her child was worth fighting for. Zora was discharged on a breezy Sunday afternoon. The sun was soft, and the sky looked like it had been freshly washed. Nurses gathered around to hug her goodbye. Dr. Ettore smiled as she handed over a small envelope. Her last CT scan, showing improvement. Annuli wheeled her daughter out the hospital doors, eyes shining with tears. But this time, not from pain. You're my warrior, she whispered. You came back to me. Zora grinned. She held Tiger the teddy bear in one hand, and Chuka's fingers in the other. She had begun calling him Uncle Daddy. It made them both laugh, though Chuka knew it was the sweetest version of redemption he could ever ask for. They drove home together, not in the black SUV that had once broken her body, but in a small silver sedan Annuli trusted. She still controlled the pace, and Chuka respected that. Their new apartment wasn't big, but it was safe. Freshly painted. Quiet. Annuli had picked it after rejecting Chuka's offer for a luxury estate. She doesn't need to feel like a princess in a palace, she told him. She just needs to feel safe. He understood. He paid the rent, but never boasted about it. He stocked the fridge, but let Annuli do the cooking. Sometimes he came over for dinner. Sometimes he read bedtime stories. Sometimes he just sat in the kitchen while Annuli braided Zora's hair, watching with a soft smile. One evening, as they ate boiled yam and palm oil, Zora said, Uncle Daddy, are you going to live with us forever? Chuka choked on his water, and Annuli laughed, really laughed, for the first time in years. Let's take it one day at a time, she replied. But her eyes had softened. Her laughter didn't feel like a guest anymore. It felt like something that had returned home. Weeks passed. Then months. Zora's scars faded. Her legs grew stronger. Her laughter returned fully. She joined a new school, where no one knew her history, just her joy. Chuka was there on her first day, holding her hand at the gate. And one afternoon, as they all walked back from school under a pink Lego sky, Zora looked up at him and said, Daddy? He turned slowly. Yes, baby. She smiled. Nothing. I just wanted to say it out loud. He crouched and hugged her, holding her tightly against his chest. Annuli watched them from a few steps away. Her heart still held the ache of the past, but it no longer bled. The wounds had turned to scars, and scars were signs that healing had happened. As they walked into the fading light, side by side, hand in hand, they didn't need to say what they had become. They were no longer broken pieces. They were family. Thank you for watching this video. What did you learn from this story? Drop it in the comments. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel Tochi Stories for more.